If you miss it, it'll be on for a couple of weeks, so you can always go back and watch it again. So let's wait for that to start. Yeah. There, right over there.
Yeah.
Okie dokie. Is everybody buckled in?
Yes.
Know where the nearest exits are?
Well, you have to
where,
do
do
those,
you know where your kitchens are?
do the, hand motions.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, no, not today. You know where the kitchens are, you know where your bathrooms are, okay? You're on your own here. So, welcome. Welcome to our latest virtual Israel tour with our extraordinary tour guides, Mike and Leah. Today they will be taking us, yes, I know, Lisa. Today, I already spoke to them. Today they will be taking us to the Old City. Our flight is a direct flight to the Old City. We will not be landing at Ben Gurion Airport. So for those of you who want to stop at Tel Aviv for some shopping, you'll have to go back on your own time. So buckle up. And without further ado, we go to takeoff and we turn things over to Mike and Leah.
No.
Or somebody.
Let me see.
Okay.
Right, Leah, you're with us, right? Okay. All right. Hi, everybody. Good morning, afternoon. It's actually evening here. And we are getting ready to start our tour. Leah's giving you a little bit of a panoramic view.
Great.
Very often, if not most often, the tours of the Old City actually start from right here. This is the Jaffa Gate. You may recognize it from, I think, our Hanukkah tour. We came through here. I'm going to talk a little bit about the Jaffa Gate as we make our way to the Jewish Quarter. So first thing we will often talk about on our tours of the Old City is, we're looking at these old city walls, right? And if I ask people to guess, hey, how old are the walls? Most of the time, people make guesses that are that give the walls like older than they are. And, the people tell me, well, these are from the Second Temple, they're Byzantine. And while the path of the walls, more or less, it's certainly in I would say a majority of places follows the same way, you have to think that Jerusalem was attacked and sacked, destroyed a whole bunch of different times. So these walls actually just date back to the time of Saladin. We're looking at the 16th century. Which again is newer than most people think. However, as I said, the walls, these walls in many places do follow the same walls of like the Second Temple period, and it's just the destruction and rebuilding that's taken place. We're going to stop here for just a second, and I want to talk about kind of how these cities were built, because when we talk about the Jerusalem, right, and the population of Jerusalem, what we have to talk about is the Old City until the late 1800s was the only place, more or less, that the Jews lived, right? So anyone's been to Jerusalem, it's all over the mountaintops, and it's, I think almost 900,000 people now, or a little over 900,000 people now. So you're talking about a very large city, over some 50 square miles. However, back in the day, that wasn't the case. Why? Well, because these walls provided safety and security for its inhabitants. So if you were to have come to Jerusalem, in 1830, 40, 50, Jerusalem, where people lived, was very much inside these walls. So let's talk about the functions of these walls a little bit before we move on. So if you look at the top of the walls, you'll see looks like a chess piece, a rook. And those are called crenellations. And as you can imagine, defenders of the city could kind of hide very easily behind the walls, shooting their arrows, crossbows at attackers. Furthermore, below the crenellations, you'll see like slits in the wall. Again, very good defensive positions. And probably my favorite is right in the middle. If you made it to the gate without getting an arrow, right, then someone was standing in that little kind of jutting room pouring hot oil from the floor. All right, so it was not so much fun attacking a city. Of course, the gates would have had doors that would have closed. And if you notice the shape of the gate doesn't go straight into the city, right? It takes a hard left turn. It's it's an angle. And what that served as is like a choking point, okay? So that choking point, again, enabled the defenders of the city to do their job and hopefully repel the attackers. Okay, so that's the city walls. I also want to mention, I don't know if Leah will be able to get us a shot of this, but when we, I'm going to read to you, right, a little part of the Shema. This is the end of the first paragraph of the Shema, and it says, "Uchatabtam al mezuzot beitecha uvisha'arecha," which in English is that you should write them, right, on your doorposts and upon your gateways. And what are you supposed to write? What are you supposed to put? A mezuzah, right? So while we all have mezuzot, right, on our doorways, it's not very often that we have a walled city gate where, you know, we're commanded to put a mezuzah. But here we are, Jaffa Gate, and you can see right over on your right-hand side, a mezuzah, which, you know, it's special. I make sure I point it out to all my guests because you're not going to see that in most of your travels. All right, the last thing I want to show you is the inset picture, and the inset picture is that same Jaffa Gate. This is where we are, and this is Ottoman rule. Okay, just the time period here we're looking at is the Ottomans rule Israel for better part of 500 years. As a matter of fact, they lose control of Jerusalem and Israel as a whole post World War I. They were beaten by the British, and the British mandate starts in 1918. After the Germans and the Turks, they were the allies. Well, actually, they were called the Axis, right? But they themselves were allies during World War I. Okay, so in around 1901, the Ottoman Sultan, Abdul Hamid II, builds a series of these clock towers all over Israel as kind of, how should I put this, a present to himself, right? Because it's his 25th anniversary as the ruler, which was a big deal then. You know, he avoided assassination and for a good long time, and he built himself clock towers, or had them built. And this is interesting because if or maybe when we do a tour of Jaffa, or you come here on your own, you go to Jaffa, that clock tower still stands and is actually very much a central part of Jaffa. So what happens to this one? Because you saw the modern day wall, and this is no longer there. What happens is General Allenby. So Allenby is the British general that defeats the Turks. And Allenby, who was a pro-Zionist, was very Zionist and had a special place in his heart for Jerusalem, would not have a large symbol of Ottoman rule such as this adorning the walls of Jerusalem. So straight away he had it taken down, and there goes the clock tower. Okay, so we're gonna move now to our second screen, which is actually right inside the Jaffa Gate. All right. So good. There you go, two. Perfecto. Okay, so if you take a look here to the left of the Jaffa Gate, what we have is a road. Okay, what's so interesting about the road? Well, we'll click on the inset picture for just a second, because this is the Jaffa Gate from the same perspective, and what do you see? You see on the left-hand side a wall, and what is a dry moat. Okay, so this was, again, late 1700s, early 1800s when this picture was taken. So what's going on here? We'll go back to or can close the inset picture and tell you the story about how the road became a road and not a wall. So we're talking about 1898, and what happens in 1898 is the German Kaiser Wilhelm II is invited by the Ottoman Turks to Jerusalem. Why? The Ottomans are hoping to form an alliance with the Germans, okay, which obviously happens. And in preparation for the Kaiser's visit, the Ottomans decide to destroy a portion of the old city walls, adjoining this dry moat around the Tower of David, which we'll show you in a minute, to allow for a horrific grand entry by the Kaiser with, of course, his whole entourage of horses and carriages and people. So we have the Kaiser to thank for this road that goes, into the old city, because there was really no road. There were just the gates, which we'll point out later in the tour. But there were just gates, and like I said, they were a choking point. There was no way to be able to get the horses and carriages of the Kaiser really through there. So here we have a beautiful road still in use today. So we're going to now kind of make our way with a video to the beginning of the Jewish quarter. And I'll narrate it a little bit. Start again right outside the Jaffa Gate. Take us about 5 minutes to get there, but it doesn't get any more real than this unless you come here. This is it. This is the way in. And our little film will give you a really accurate and I think beautiful kind of view of this city leading to the Jewish quarter. On your left is the beginning of the Christian quarter. Soon we'll show you a map of all four quarters. There's four quarters in the Old City. The Jewish quarter, of course, the Muslim quarter, the Christian quarter down this way, and the Armenian quarter. Walking straight ahead, if you continued straight ahead, you'll see like a blue umbrella way up there. That's the beginning of the Arab Shuk. We're gonna come and take a right-hand turn pretty soon. To your right-hand side, though, folks, what you'll see there is the Tower of David Museum, and the moat that surrounds the museum. The oldest stones on the very, very, very bottom actually date back to the Hasmoneans. So we're talking about, 1st and 2nd century BCE, right? The Hasmoneans start their rule around 165, and they rule Israel until about 63 BCE. So about 100 years of Hasmonean rule, and they actually have what you would call a fortress and even like a municipal building here. All right. We'll walk by the Migdal David, the Tower of David Museum. Great museum. Highly recommended if you come here. It really is a wonderful museum that goes through each and every time period of Jerusalem. And at night, they have a wonderful sound and light show. Straight ahead is what's called the Saraya, And the Saraya was horse stables, along with police during the Ottoman times. And guess what? It's still a police station. When I was on a mission with my local Jewish Federation before I made Aliyah, we actually had access to that security room. And it was fascinating. And what I learned is that you can't walk 6 or 7 feet in the old city without being on camera. They had dozens and dozens of cameras looking all over the city. If you see signs, Armenian Tavern, this is the kind of the border of the Jewish quarter and Armenian quarter. Also notice how narrow the streets are. Was definitely not built for vehicle traffic. And when we take our tourists along here, we're sure to warn them that they should walk in single file so they don't get hit by a car. Great. And we are going to get ready any minute. I'm going to take the turn down James Street and heading straight out to the Jewish Quarter. It's really pretty. All right. Another minute or two of walking, and we'll be entering the Jewish Quarter. All right. Leah, you want to fast forward us maybe 30 seconds and we'll get there. All right. And we go to the next slide and talk about a welcome to the Jewish Quarter. Whoop. Here we are. Okay, so at the end of St. James Street is Ararat Road, which is interesting because, right, we're kind of right in between. It says there's a sign straight there. It says, welcome to the Jewish Quarter. And Ararat Road, for those of you who might not know, is where Noah's Ark landed. And Mount Ararat is located in Armenia. So the Armenian Quarter has an Ararat Road, and I think that's just a cool little tidbit. So here we are at the beginning of the Jewish Quarter on Ararat Road, and we can take a look at the map of the 4 quarters. Thank you, Leah. And well, if you take a look at the map, something's going to stand out, and that is that the largest quarter of all 4 quarters of the old city is the Muslim quarter, right? So I know, it's politics and everything, right? But the Muslims still have most of the land, most of the real estate in the old city. And you should also know that between the Jewish Quarter and the Armenian Quarter, we argue who has the smallest, right? The Christians have the next largest, and depending on who you talk to, an Armenian or a Jew, they'll tell you they have the smallest quarter. A little bit about the old city, just from in the Jewish Quarter, from a logistics standpoint. So we're talking about only 2,000 people living here. The area is small. The area of the Jewish Quarter is 29 acres. And you'll see in the Jewish Quarter, right, that we have the Dung Gate, which leads right to the Jewish Quarter. Near the Jewish Quarter is the Zion Gate, and of course, as I had said before, the Jaffa Gate, which is the main starting point for all of the tours. The Christian tour. Christian Quarter, of course, has as its centerpiece the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, And you can see the blue line of the Via Dolorosa starts in the Muslim quarter and leads to the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. The center point, of course, of the Old City in general is the Temple Mount. That was our last tour, if I'm not mistaken, where we took you guys for a tour of the Temple Mount. So I'll take just a second as an introduction, because we're going to come back to this theme a number of times, both Leah and I, which is between 1948, at the end of the War of Independence, until the end of the Six-Day War in 1967, Jews do not live in the Old City, okay? Furthermore, Jerusalem is split into an Arab East Jerusalem and a Jewish Western Jerusalem. The Old City in its entirety, except for a small part, Mount Zion, near the Zion Gate, is in Arab hands, okay? The Jews are expelled. We'll get into the story, but I just want everyone to understand here that between 48 and 67, Jews didn't live in the Old City, didn't have access to the Old City at all. Okay, so that is my introduction to the Jewish Quarter, and we'll move on to the next slide and introduce Leah, who will talk about the Old Yishuv Court Museum. Okay, Leah.
Okay, hi everybody, and I want to wish you all well. Everyone should just be healthy and feel good and get over all these winter bugs. So thank you, Mike. That was such a nice walk through the Old City. It's such a beautiful day. I liked hearing the cars and the birds and, kind of really feeling the pulse of the Old City, which is just so beautiful here. You can see with the flowers, a little touch of color, like what it does for the stone. So we're standing outside of a Jewish house, which actually goes back about 500 years. It was sort of the house of the rabbinic leaders, like throughout the generations. There's a legend, or perhaps truth, that the Ari was born over here in Jerusalem about 500 years ago. The Or Chaim, other big names in the rabbinic world, lived in this very building. There was a synagogue in here, and in 1948, this was the home of a leading rabbi in the Jewish Quarter. Rabbi Weingarten and his wife and his family lived here. And there was a very powerful moment when the British were about to leave, and everyone knows like a war is going to break out, but still the British are dividing up property. Some is going to the Jews and some is going to the Arabs. And a British major knocks on this door over here. See if you can see that door right here. Today it's a museum, by the way, the Old Yishuv Court Museum, you can visit. But so he knocks on the door and he says, Rabbi Weingarten, I'm holding a key to Zion Gate. It's a key to the Old City of Jerusalem. Your people haven't had the key to Jerusalem in thousands of years. And I'm handing this key to you. And it was very emotional for both of them. And Rabbi Weingarten takes the key. He says the blessing of Thanksgiving, the Shechianu blessing. And it was a very, very emotional moment. Now, this is just before the state of Israel is declared. The British are about to leave. And just shortly thereafter, so the war had already started back the year before with the UN partition plan, but now it's going to involve, before it was just the local Arabs against the local Palestinian Jews, as they were called. And now it's going to involve all the countries around, going to attack Israel, and the Jewish Quarter is going to come under siege. And not too many days later, about 2 weeks later, Rabbi Weingarten is going to take that key and leave the Old City. And as Mike had mentioned, there will be no Jews living in the Old City, no Jewish presence whatsoever for 19 years. So let's take a look at some of these pictures. So we have here, this is there was a Time Life photographer, John Phillips, who happened to be in the Old City, and it's kind of like he was like, I don't know, I feel like he was invisible. Nobody cared. He wasn't Jewish. He wasn't Arab. He's walking around taking pictures. And so he's taking this picture of the Jewish people being just after they're surrendering the old city, evacuating just before Shabbat, Friday afternoon. It's hot. It's May. They're all. And why is it taking so long to go out of Zion Gate? This is Zion Gate because it's actually there's barbed wire, so they just can barely fit through. They grabbed their most precious possessions from their houses, but they're probably not going to get them through the gate because also the Jordanians are standing over them. They grabbed their candlesticks, something, whatever they had. They were poor people, but whatever they could carry, whatever they had. And as they're leaving, it's even being stolen from them. And they don't know, are they ever going to come back, right? What's ever going to happen? This is the women and children mostly. They took all the men ages like 16 to 90 because there weren't so many people actually defending the old city. There were they took everyone, all the men, and said that they were fighters. Now these people weren't actually really fighters so much as like just kind of older like religious people or younger religious people, whatever. But they took them all out of a different gate and they took them prisoner of war for about 9 months. And here you can see, this is a picture that you may have seen the other picture before. It's pretty well known. This one, I just came across it. I don't know. It's not so well known. This is coming out through what's sometimes called the Muslim Quarter, heading out Lions Gate. And these are the Jewish prisoners. And the Jordanians, they were sort of embarrassed because they're fighting, they have a big army, supported by the British. And they're kind of like embarrassed, like, wait, who are we fighting? A bunch of like women, children, older people, and, and a couple of guys with guns. Like, so they took out, every man they could find to be prisoners of war. Here we have the Jordanian soldiers standing up on the ramparts that Mike showed us at the beginning. And these were built by the Turks, but now you have the Jordanian soldiers using them and shooting down at Jerusalem at, civilian population. This went on for 19 years until, of course, the completely like surprising, some say miraculous 6-day war, when all of a sudden everything turned around. And here are the famous, the iconic almost picture of the Israeli paratroopers at the Western Wall. And they have that look in their eyes. They're like looking up at the wall. And actually it was the wife, David Rubinger was the photographer. And he's going through all these pictures. He says, I want pictures of the famous people, and she says, his wife says, this is your picture. Look at their faces. Look at the way they're looking at the wall. That's the picture. And that in fact made him quite famous. But this was 19 years later, complete turnaround of events, and the old city were able to come back. Israel's able to come back into the Jewish quarter, to the Western Wall, to Har Hazeitim, the Mount of Olives Cemetery, to all of the places that everyone had just dreamed to return to for those 19 years. And here we have a map. So here we can see that the old city is going to be under the Jordanians. Also the pink here, all of this area becomes under Jordanian control 1948 until the 6-Day War in 1967. The green is Israel under the new state of Israel. We got the new state of Israel 75 years ago, but we lost the heart of Jerusalem, the old city. Of course, Mount Scopus was just an enclave that also stayed part of Jerusalem. Now this becomes what's called east over here and West Jerusalem over here. And they are roughly east and west. When you walk around Jerusalem today, you won't see any signs telling you east and west. You won't see any walls. You won't see any mention of it because Israel is really pretty much supporting the idea of a united city. The city functions as a united city, but in the worldview, in the media, it's like very, very clear that there's an east and west. And the east and west, just to be clear about it, was because of those 19 years. The 19 years when Jordan was in the old city and surrounding area, and the new state of Israel was established with Jerusalem here as the capital. And it goes back to just those 19 years, but as you know, it's still very much a discussed topic today. Now, we're just going to make our way down this beautiful walkway towards sort of the center of the Jewish quarter. And you could see, families living here, and there's schools, there's restaurants, there's shops. It's actually one of the most, I would say, fun parts of the old city. A lot of people who don't do like a full tour of the Jewish quarter, they'll always come here to eat and to shop and to kind of, it's just a fun part of the city. Although super worthwhile to do a tour of the old city, because really there is quite a lot over here. I'm going to turn around and Mike is going to tell us a little bit, what are we looking at?
Great. Thanks so much, Leah. So what we are looking at is known as the Cardo. So this is the Byzantine Cardo of Jerusalem. Explanation. First, explain Byzantine. So Byzantine is a time period, just a continuation of Roman rule. So what's the difference? Because we hear about, time period called Roman time period and then the Byzantine. So the only difference is that one of the Roman emperors, his name was Constantine, in the year 325 CE, legalizes Christianity. And when he legalizes Christianity, we kind of, as scholars, historians, then start calling rule in Israel and Palestine at the time, they start calling it Byzantine and not Roman anymore. And that period that starts at 325 lasts until the first Arab conquest of Palestine and Jerusalem, and that happens around late 630s, 636 to 640. The Arabs come and take over here, and the Byzantine period ends. Okay, what is a Cardo? So a Cardo was one of the main streets in any Roman planned city. Okay, the Romans had they planned their cities out. It was on a grid system. The Cardo was the main north-south street. There was often a main east-west street called the Decumanus, and in the middle was the Roman Forum. Okay, what was the function of the Cardo? The function of the Cardo was typically, think about Main Street, think about a shopping mall, right? This is where people came and gathered and shopped for everything. They might talk politics there. If you were a Roman soldier, you would likely be hanging out on one of these main streets or actually in the Forum to make sure that citizens were behaving themselves. What's the benefit of this type of a plan? Well, think about it. You're an empire, right? Rome was a huge empire. And anywhere they went, they wanted their soldiers to be able to understand that, where they were. So when they came in and conquered, they rebuild the city whenever possible based on this grid plan and these two main streets. And it was much easier for Roman legions to come and control the areas. So it's very, very functional. Okay, that's the Roman city plan. And we're going to move to the next slide where I'll take you down inside the Cardo. Okay, and you could take a look on your left-hand side. You'll see remains of what were the shop stalls. And towards the right, I want to point out, when we get over there, that all you see is a wall, but this was actually significantly wider than what it is. We're really only seeing kind of like 2/3 of it. And it was a very wide bazaar, right? There you go. Okay, so the other side would have had shop stalls as well, but which I'll be able to show you in our next slide. But it actually is significantly wider. It goes another 10-15 feet towards the right. I'm going to ask Leah to please click on our map. I want to talk about this map and its importance. This is called the Madaba map. And what is the Madaba map? So this is actually a map showing the old city, the Jerusalem, as it would have looked around 550 CE. Okay, this is actually the oldest geographic floor mosaic ever found. It still exists today. You can go visit it. It's in Madaba, Jordan, in a It's the floor mosaic in a church. And the story kind of goes like this. It was discovered in 1884 when the Greek Orthodox Church was, if the word is excavating, they wanted to rebuild a church that they knew was on this spot, an ancient church. So they had this land and they went to clear away, all the stones. The church was destroyed by an earthquake many centuries earlier in the 700s. And voila, they find this mosaic. The mosaic is over 60 feet long. I believe it's over 20 feet wide, has over 150 sites on this mosaic of all different parts of Israel, like pretty much like the whole country of Israel at that time, again, known as Palestine. And the sites are actually named in Greek. So this is a portion of the old city. I'm going to ask Leah to help point me out a couple of things. But first, I think what I want to say is, well, let's point out the Cardo. Okay, so we could show the Cardo. And what's the importance here? Well, when the Israeli Antiquities Authority started excavating after the Six-Day War, they were able to use this map as pretty much 100% confirmation of the exact location of the Roman Byzantine Cardo. So, that's kind of cool in and of itself, that here you have this map, dating back to the mid 500s. And, and here we are in 1967, using the map as confirmation that indeed we have found the Byzantine Cardo. Leah, would you point out the Jaffa Gate? Because there was a Jaffa Gate back then. Again, in very much the same place. It had been destroyed. That's the Jaffa Gate that we walked through. And the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, very much center, right, to the Byzantine times. I pointed that on another map. That's that. And I don't know, Leah, do you, we didn't talk about this, but there's another big church, the Nia Church, which is located on the northern side with a big red roof. That's the Nia Church, which was a church larger than the Hagia Sophia in Turkey. Huge church, eventually destroyed, I believe, by the Arabs. But again, by knowing when the Nia Church was built and destroyed, that was one of the ways they were able to date this map. So that's the Madaba map. It's quite well known, used by a lot of guides, and a really kind of a cool map. And if you get to Jordan and you get to see the Madaba map in its entirety, it is absolutely fascinating. Okay, to our next slide, we're going to go inside the Cardo now. So we're just going northbound. We're going to go right? We would have walked through those gates. Actually, it's not the way you get there. We would have walked around, and here we are inside the Cardo. This has been totally renovated. If we were to able to continue on, I'll give you guys one guess what the Cardo is used for today. Yes, shopping. On the other side of that mural, if you continue on, there's plenty of Judaica shops and artists, and eventually it leads to the Arab Shuk, more markets. All right, I want to take a look, though, at the Cardo murals very briefly, but the artist's rendition of what the Cardo would have looked like in Byzantine times. And I just want to kind of point out something that I think is kind of cute, and that is over to the left, right? If we have a very famous, that's him, we have a very famous celebrity, if you will, right? That is Jerusalem's most famous and maybe favorite mayor. That is one and only Teddy Kollek. So, the artist had a sense of humor. He put in Teddy Kollek's picture. Next to Teddy Kollek were a couple of archaeologists that actually did the digging there. Just, keep it light. All right, we'll continue. There's actually more murals now. And I think for both Leah and I can speak for both of us. These two murals actually show what do they show? They show actual shops that would have existed in this time period. And why is this meaningful? Well, it's meaningful because the research that was done for to paint these, right? They went to this scholar and author. His name is Eyal Meron, and Eyal Meron was actually our teacher in Jerusalem. He was the one who took us around Jerusalem and helped to make Leah and I the guides that we are today. He's written a number of books. He really is a leading scholar in Jerusalem on a lot of time periods in Jerusalem. And they asked Eyal to help design. What would have a spice shop look like? And so he told them. Here's what it would look like. Here's the type of people, the type of clothes that people would have worn in the 300s, 400s, 500s, in that 4th, 5th, and 6th century, and then they made this mural. So way to go, Eyal. We love him. He was a fabulous teacher. Okay, and from here, I think that we can. That we can move on, and we're going to go to the Horva Synagogue. Okay, so let's show you where we are. We are really, if I from the Cardo, maybe Leah, we can just kind of show them where the Cardo is, right on the other side. Okay, Cardo is literally feet away from the Horva Synagogue. Okay. The Horva Synagogue is, we're going to spend quite a bit of time here. And the reason we're going to spend quite a bit of time here is we want to talk about the significance of the Horva Synagogue. Leah's going to do the deep dive. I merely want to tell you that this is the rebuilt Horva Synagogue. And I'm going to ask Leah to click on the inset pictures, show you what the Horva would have looked like. Pre-48, right? That's the Horva Synagogue with its large dome. And if we move on, we'll be able to show you the May 1948 when David Ben-Gurion on Friday, right before Shabbat, he declares the new state of Israel. I read through a little bit of this article, and the article says that a good portion of Jerusalem was actually in Jewish hands, and while that's true, the battles were raging in the old city. And we'll move on, and we'll see. We can see what happens. This is a Jordanian legionnaire standing in what is the rubble of the Horva Synagogue. Okay, you can see the picture of the Ten Commandments there, and he's standing in what is the destroyed Horva Synagogue. And we move on, and you actually get a picture of people sitting more or less outside the Zion Gate. Okay, if you look carefully in the background, you'll actually see Dormition Abbey, which is a church right outside the Zion Gate, and the ramparts, those stairs leading down, which is how both Leah and I often will take our groups when we're going through the old city down to the city of David, down to the Dung Gate. So, and here we have, you can just look at the destruction. I mean, it's almost total. Okay, let's move on to the next one. What do we have here? This is immediately, well, not immediately, but shortly after the Six-Day War. When I say shortly, maybe a few years afterwards. And what we're looking at here on the left-hand side is still kind of the destroyed Horva Synagogue. But next to that, you'll see immediately after the 67 war, we have brand new buildings going up. So, if you want to talk about maybe the turning lemons into lemonade, right? So because the Jordanians really, almost utterly destroyed the Jewish quarter, first it allowed us to rebuild it even bigger and better. And second, we were able to do excavations that otherwise we would have just never been able to do. So, you know, we can talk about finding the famous broad wall of Hezekiah that we have the Jordanians to thank for, and we don't have a picture of that. You'll have to come to Jerusalem to see it. But we would have not known that existed except for a Jordanian shell that you know, blew up a building, and underneath when we cleared it in 67, 68, we found what we later learned was Hezekiah's broad wall. Okay, let's continue. So as part of the renovations, there was an early thought, maybe early 70s, Leah, right? That to rebuild the Chorva synagogue, but that didn't happen. And what they did do, though, is rebuild an arch. And anyone who was here from the early 70s, right up until, 2003, 4, 5, this is what you would have seen in, as a central picture, as a memento, if you will, of Jordanian destruction, was this arch. It was really a prominent feature in the Jewish Quarter, maybe one of the most prominent features in the Jewish Quarter. And again, those of you who visited Israel, I remember my first time coming as a young adult in 1987, and this stuck in my mind. This was representative of the Jordanian destruction as well as the Jewish reunification of the old city. I'm going to take just one more second before I turn it over, because I found something that I thought could be very interesting for everyone. And that is a couple of quotes from the local commander of the Jordanian Arab Legion. His name is Abdullah Al-Tel, and he described the destruction of the Jewish Quarter in his memoirs. And this is his description as he writes it, okay? He says, "The operations of calculated destruction were set in motion. I knew that the Jewish Quarter was densely populated with Jews who caused their fighters a good deal of interference and difficulty. I embarked, therefore, on the shelling of the quarter with mortars, creating harassment and destruction. Only 4 days after our entry into Jerusalem, the Jewish Quarter had become their graveyard. Death and destruction reigned over it. As the dawn of Friday, May 28th, 1948, we're only talking about 14 days, literally 2 weeks after Ben-Gurion declares the state. So he says, as of dawn was about to break, the Jewish Quarter emerged convulsed in a black cloud, a cloud of death and agony. And indeed, on May 28th, 1948, the Jews surrendered the Jewish Quarter. And what did he say to his superiors? He said, for the first time in 1,000 years, not a single Jew remains in the Jewish Quarter. Not a single building remains intact. This makes the Jews' return here impossible. So I'm going to turn it over to Leah. I think she's going to show you it's not impossible.
Okay, wow, thanks, Mike, so much. Okay, we're going to go inside. So we will be talking a lot about this 48, 67, what happened in between, what happened after, because I feel like when you come to the old city, this is the story that it has to be told. You just look everywhere. It's like everywhere in the Jewish Quarter. I mean, the Jewish Quarter is beautiful because it was rebuilt, but even that is a question like, oh, why are the buildings so new if it's the old city, right? So I feel like it's a story that needs to be told. At the same time, in Israel, we have peace with Jordan officially now since the 1990s, and no one is really harping on these issues. No one is really wants any kind of reconciliation. It's just, it is what it is. Where, one of the strengths of the Jewish people is, looking forward and saying, okay, we remember the past, but we have to look, towards the future. We can't dwell in it. So, but it is something here we're going to see over and over. And I also did find it completely shocking. I just read today an article that was written by one of the members of the Jordanian government. And it was a long, complicated subject, but as part of his sort of discussion, he said, oh yeah, when we were in charge of the old city, we were responsible for the Jewish sites and the Jewish holy sites. It's like we were responsible for destroying them, right? And also the 38,000 graves on the Mount of Olives, on Har Zeitim, that were turned over and they're still being recovered. So, at the same time, we don't, it's water under the bridge, but when you come to Jerusalem, it's like a story that still sort of just needs to be told. There's a lot of difficult moments and there's a lot of really inspiring moments about this story. This synagogue, I would say, is kind of a symbol of, in general, the Jewish return to Jerusalem. That's kind of its identity. It starts 300 years ago, over 300 years ago, in the year 1700. And by the way, this is just, it's beautiful. We'll take a look here. But it starts 300 years ago with a Rabbi, Yehuda Hasid, and he decides to walk from Poland. Okay, like amazing. Hundreds of Jews. He says, listen, it's time to go back to Jerusalem. And they're literally going to walk. I mean, I don't know, maybe Poland was that bad. Probably, I don't know. But anyway, they're literally going to walk, and they don't all make it. And he's got money, he's got sponsors, he's going to come and start to contribute more to the Jewish quarter, which we'll see in a little bit, actually goes back to 1267. But anyway, so he comes over here and he unfortunately arrives, and a few days later passes away. And now the community has a problem because he was sort of the whole connection back to, to funding. He had the leadership, and what are they going to do? I mean, they're Polish. They don't, they don't speak the language. They don't have the local sort of skills. They make alcohol. They could make alcohol, but, it didn't really go well in the Muslim area. So what are they going to do? So they start borrowing money, and they're being taken advantage of. And after 20 years, and they can't pay the money back, and they're basically chased out of town. The synagogue is burnt down, the property is taken, and there's a ban put on Ashkenazi Jews. Any, Eastern European Jews are actually forbidden from coming into Jerusalem. Now, the local Arabs at the time, they didn't realize that, the Moroccan Jews and the Turkish Jews and the other ones who were, hanging around there, it's all one people. So sometimes the Ashkenazi Jews dressed up like the Sephardi Jews and tried to, be there, but basically no Ashkenazi Jews were there for 100 years. And in the early 1800s, there was a lot of rabbis were starting to feel, it's really time to return to Jerusalem. And truth is that there had been attempts to return to Jerusalem since the time when the Romans destroyed Jerusalem in 70. You have, after that, Bar Kokhba revolt. You have all kinds of periods of time. I'd love to show you in the city. We can actually document where there were different periods of time when Jews did try to come back. They left a synagogue. They left some kind of, inscriptions, but basically here we have in the 1800s, and there's we really got to get back to Jerusalem. So you have here the Vilna Gaon, the Gra, and he is going to send, he tries to come, he's not able to, but his students managed to get here. And his students, some of them are actually the Rivlin family, and that's where the former president, Rivi Rivlin, is related back to that family. And they managed to undo all the problems for Eastern European Jews to live and to be in Jerusalem. They get forgiven. It's 100 years later, but they get forgiven the debt. They pay some people. They get permission to rebuild, and they restart the Ashkenazi Jewish community in the early 1800s. And by 1864, they're going to build the Chorva, the synagogue. Now, it had been called all these years because it was destroyed, and it was the synagogue of Rabbi Yehuda Hasid. So they're going to call it, all these years, it got this name, the Chorva. The Chorva is a bad name. It's like the destruction, the ruin, right? The ruined synagogue. But that was the name of it. It was the ruin of Rabbi Yehuda Hasid, and they rebuild it. And so the unofficial name becomes the Chorva, but they actually rebuild it in 1864. And it takes, it's an amazing thing. They go around the world, literally around the Jewish world, collecting money from everybody. it wasn't just from European Jews, they went all around the world. Everybody really wanted to be part of this, to rebuilding. It was just a powerful symbol of Jews returning to Jerusalem, and they wanted to be involved with this. They say that the yeshiva students even built this very high dome, with their own hands. And it was just a tremendous monument. It was living, it was active. Anything big that happened in Jerusalem from 1864 until 1948 was probably going to happen in this synagogue. So we have Rav Kook. Rav Kook was the chief rabbi under the British of Jerusalem, and then of the whole area and of Palestine. And he was the British mandated Palestine. And he made famous speeches in the Horva. He was like, ceremonies would take place relating to him. We have, this is the Ger Rebbe here, Imre Emet. And this is a very emotional ceremony that was taking place 1942. And they know what's going on in the Holocaust, and they get together to pray in the Horva synagogue for the welfare of all the Jewish people, and that the Nazis shouldn't come, here to Jerusalem. There was a threat of that. In the end, they didn't. But so this was like big moments are happening in this synagogue. There was a girl named Puishstein. There is a woman named Puishsteiner, and this was her synagogue. She was 7 years old in 1948, and she used to come in here. And she said, when she was a child under the British mandate, this is when all of the war is building up. And she said, in this synagogue, Friday night, they felt like free. Nobody was bothering them. The British weren't, stealing. One time they stole her chocolate, and they weren't bothering them. They felt like totally free, like noble people. And she used to look up at the ceiling, and the older version, they rebuilt it here exactly the same, but they didn't paint it the same way. So you have up here, the ceiling used to be covered with it was blue with gold stars. What a cool synagogue, right? So she used to look up with her father. She'd go and she would look up and she's like, is that the sky? And, but so that was blown up. And it was blown up. Mike talked about this, blown up on what happened was on May 26th, 1948, they tell the Jewish community, if you leave right now, you abandon your homes, you surrender the old city, you leave, then, if you don't leave, we're going to blow up the Horva. It was a huge threat. Jewish community didn't leave right then. The next day, May 27th, they blow it up, on purpose. They come in, they blow it up. And that happened to be Lag BaOmer. So Lag BaOmer is kind of time of festive, bonfires. And so this was such a painful moment. Imagine kind of the biggest synagogue really, and the most important one perhaps in, the whole land of Israel at the time, and blown up. Right. And Puishsteiner says that for 19 years, she used to climb up to Mount Zion. Mount Zion was outside the walls. It stays in Israeli hands. And she would look out and say, can I see my house? Can I see my synagogue? She couldn't see the synagogue. It was gone. She said she could still smell the smoke. She could just imagine, could still smell the smoke for all those years, 19 years. So eventually when they're going to rebuild it, and it was not so simple to say who's going to pay for it, who's going to run it. It took a long, long time to get these details worked out. As Mike mentioned, they built the arch in the meantime. But eventually, when they rebuilt it, you have here the original, part of the original, what was left. You can see that here. They did it completely according to the same style. They had all kinds of pictures and models of how it had looked. They had here this big ark, right, for the Torah scrolls. They could hold 50. This was back in the 1860s. They had this huge ark. They brought it from Russia. It was so special. And so they recreated that. And we'll just swing around here. And we're actually going to go up to the rooftop as well, which is really a lot of fun, especially since we don't have to worry if we're afraid of heights because we're on Zoom. So here you can see a little bit more of synagogue. And now we are going to go up to the rooftop and get a little more perspective. Okay, so now they have this balcony here. It goes around the whole dome. And look at that. You can go up there and it's wow, looking down. So now why here? Why is this the Jewish quarter? So we have a picture here of a rabbi, Nachmanides, the Ramban. In 1267, he was in one of these famous discussions with the priest, and they used to like to do this back in those days, and they would get like a rabbi to debate. It was called the Disputation of Barcelona, and they would debate, theological issues like, why the Jews say Jesus wasn't the Messiah, and they wanted him to go into the Talmudic sources and explain them, because the Talmudic sources in some places mention Jesus, and they wanted him to explain. And they promised him, there was the king of James of Aragon, and he said, I promise you, and because the rabbi said, I'm not going to do this. Like, I know how this goes. We come, we make, nice arguments, we explain ourselves, and then you like run the Jewish people out of town. And, so he said, well, I'm not going to do this. So the king says, no, I really want to hear what you have to say. I promise you, just, come and speak and nothing will happen. But things didn't go so well. In the end, the king gives him 300 gold coins, but he says, listen, you got to get out of here. So the Ramban, he's 73 years old, and he has to run away, and he comes to Jerusalem. He comes to Jerusalem, and he finds only 2 Jews in the whole city, in the whole old city. And he says, what is this? Only 2 Jews in Jerusalem? We have to renew the community. So he finds an empty, abandoned building, turns it into a synagogue, and that is the restarting of the Jewish quarter. So it's like 750 years ago. And there were always Jews in Jerusalem, 750 years until 1948, when for those 19 years, there was nobody. And then after 67, returned. So the origins of this area are with the Ramban. And that's why this is like the Jewish quarter, when in 1700, Yehuda Hasid comes. This is where he's going to naturally kind of buy property and start try to establish his community over there. And throughout the ages, there's synagogues. We have the 4 Sephardic synagogues. You can actually do a tour of like all the different synagogues throughout like the different periods of time, and that the Jewish community was there. Now we're going to swing around to the other side over here of this balcony. Mike.
Hey, thanks, Leah. All right, I'm going to give you a quick overview here. If we can show them, Leah, where Mount Scopus is. Perfect. That's Mount Scopus. On Mount Scopus is Hebrew University. And to the right is the Mount of Olives. And yep, that's all the ridge of the Mount of Olives. And then, of course, you see the golden dome of the rock on the Temple Mount. And, at different periods of time, after the Chorva synagogue was built, Jews were not always allowed to go to the Western Wall, the Wailing Wall. And yet when, Jews have been inspired, right, by the Temple Mount and the Western Wall for thousands of years. And there were times that the Jewish people would come up here to pray, to be inspired, and to be able to look at the Temple Mount from the very spot that we're at. Okay, I kind of think I want to turn this over to Leah for just a second, because we've got kind of a neat YouTube video, and I think Leah, do you want to just talk about it, because it's
Sure.
a little personal for you?
So
yeah,
if you look down here, you see there's like a plaza. It's it's a big open square, and this was actually where there, back in the day, there were houses and buildings. Okay, it's all gone. You can see it's all new. So it's all beautiful and new here. And this square is used for all kinds of like, gatherings and, events. And before Purim, so there's a kind of tradition. A lot of the yeshivas do these kind of flash mobs, and it's just so much fun. They go out, they leave school and they go all together and they do, a flash mob. So this is a yeshiva my son went to. This is a couple of years back, and they're doing a flash mob, and they're doing it here in two places in Jerusalem. One is right below where we're like standing right here in the square called the Chorva Square, the center of the Jewish quarter. And the other place, it kind of switches back and forth. The other place is like in the center of town, Jaffa Road, over that way, Zion Square. It's outside the old city. And you're going to see it goes back and forth. But I think it's just so sweet to see like this kind of, in live, like kind of like a live action. It's kind of fun. And a song basically celebrating that God gave the land of Israel to the Jewish people. So let's take a look. Here they are at the Western Wall doing like the morning prayers, and now we're gonna skip ahead to middle of the flash mob. Okay, so lots of fun before Purim and spring. So, okay, so now we're going to dive down. And Mike, I think you're going to take us to our next.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. That's, folks, that's very much the spirit of Israel. Right before Purim, we're getting ready to celebrate, and the kids in the yeshivas go out and flash mob it. And, running into these things when you're guiding, it's just, it's amazing. And of course, people get to experience that live and firsthand. They're generally moved beyond words. Okay, so we're going to move away from our story of the destruction of the Jewish quarter and its rebuilding, and we're going to travel back in time now. We're going to travel back in time to times of Herod, right? Times of the Second Temple, and you may be asking, we're looking at this Wall Archaeological Museum, and there's actually a yeshiva connected to it. And again, I'm going to let Leah do the deep dive. But I will tell you, give you like a little bit of a hint and say that we're going to be exploring the 2,000-year-old upper city of Jerusalem. So we'll take a look at the inset picture so you can see the map and look at the anything in red with the red roofs on it. That was the upper city. That's where we are today. Those were where the upper class lived, right? Your Jerusalemites who either had some money or especially if they were part of the priestly class. So these were their homes. And I think I'll turn it back over to Leah, and she could take us down below and explain some of the archaeology there. All right. Thanks.
Okay, thank you, Mike. So we're gonna go in over here where the arrows. We're gonna go into that door. We're gonna go underground because all of what we're seeing here is like 750 years, or in the last 750 years. And of course, when you go older, you got to go down below. So these are places that were basically hiding here, underneath the life in the Jewish quarter that was going on. And I guess the silver lining that we never would have discovered these homes if it wasn't for the bombings, because the bombings just turned the entire area, practically like almost everything, to rubble. So the archaeologists said, okay, well, it's kind of a good opportunity to dig. And the builders said, hey, let's rebuild. So you've got these like beautiful, like new buildings, but 40 years old now. And we're going to go down underneath and see what was hiding under there that was only discovered, after the war. It's unbelievable that this is still here. It looks like if you've been to Masada, it's the same builders, it's the same time period. You can see here like mosaic floors There's a mikveh, an ancient, actually, there's a lot of them here because these were Kohanim. They were serving in the temple. So they would use the mikveh a lot to prepare to go up to the temple, up to the Beit HaMikdash. And you have, so they found here 6 houses. The truth is they keep finding more because as they continue to rebuild different parts of the Jewish quarter, like they're rebuilding another synagogue, Tiferet Yisrael, that was also blown up by the Jordanians. So they found more of these houses underneath. So you get this image of like the entire Jewish quarter underneath, which is 750 years, goes back 2,000 years underground. Now, usually in Israel, when you want to build a new building, you have to excavate underneath first. You have to do, even if it's not like a full excavation, you have to do what's called like a salvage, kind of a survey or an excavation, basically checking, is there something important under there before we build a new building? It may never be seen, it could be destroyed. So what's under there? Now, in the Jewish quarter, they made an exemption because there was such a urgency to say, wow, we want to rebuild. Like we got to, we came back and we've got to get back life here. And at the same time, they said, you don't have to excavate. But this particular property was designated for a new yeshiva. It was called Yeshivat HaKotel. And these were basically young men who were very idealistic, who were willing to come to live in the Jewish quarter after the 6-day war. There was still no running water. There was no proper sewage. There never had been in the old city. And it was rough there. They felt maybe still dangerous. It was just like sitting in complete like mess, rubble, like stuff everywhere, just like almost like a tornado had come through. And so this was here, this picture here is in the corner is Rav Hadari, and he was one of the people leading the this Yeshivat HaKotel, bringing in these young men to learn Torah and to kind of sit there in the Jewish quarter and to start to bring back life to the Jewish quarter. And they said, Rav Hadari, Rabbi, we found evidence that there's houses of Jewish houses 2,000 years ago, Kohanim, right? And we're going to build here, and it's okay because we're allowed to build. We don't have to dig. And he said, "Are you crazy? Like you found houses of Jews from 2,000 years ago, and you want me to destroy them?" He said, "No way." So we'll just build up on stilts and like this. So you could see they put stilts here. Now, what he didn't know. And so actually the school's up top, right? And all the dorms and it's a big, big place. And what he didn't know when he made that decision was it was going to take 19 more years and $19 million to pick up the entire school and Yeshivat HaKotel and put it up on these stilts. Anyway, under here, there were 6 houses. We see basically parts of 3 of them in this kind of basement, say, excavation. And so let's take a look now. We're going to walk through the site. It's actually under renovation right now, so this is the best way to see it. Unfortunately, it's not open right now, but it will be great. Maybe in another half a year or so we'll be back open. And they found there are all kinds of vessels. Archaeologists love a destruction, right? It's the best thing for them. Because why? Because when somebody moves, they pick up their stuff and they go and there's nothing left. But when, unfortunately, Jerusalem was destroyed, in this case, in the year 70 by the Romans. So everything just stayed. And what they did is the Romans destroyed like the upper levels of the houses. They kind of collapsed in. No, it was such a mess that no one built here until what Mike was mentioning, the Byzantine, the early Christian period. That was hundreds of years later. By that point, this area had kind of covered up, filled up with dirt. Then they started to build here a bit, but this layer was preserved. So you find here Jewish style vessels like stone, because they cannot become impure. You only find this type of vessel in a Jewish area, and they find a lot of them here. You find also Jewish style pottery. There's differences. The archaeologists can identify like whose pottery, was what. And there's a really cute story. It's actually really hard to put back these pieces of pottery. Imagine you find a broken jar and you have to put it all back together. It's a particular skill. Not so many people in the world know how to do this. Most of the people all of the people actually up to now who are doing this are women. And they brought these women from Italy to put back together these pieces. And this woman picks up a piece and she says, wait a second, I know this piece. And they said, what do you mean you know this piece? She goes, yeah, I put together a jar last time I was here and this piece was missing. And she goes and she finds the jar and she puts the piece in. It was very exciting. So they also found here this inscription of this menorah. You can see it in the museum. I'll show you, it's up on the wall. So it's hard to see it. It's here in this space, but here's a picture of it close up. And they found this hand inscribed picture of the menorah, like temple menorah, right? This is the 7-branched menorah like they had back in the temple times. And this is like a drawing. It's like somebody who was in the temple, saw the gold menorah and was like, oh, I'm going to draw a picture of that on my wall. And this is what they found, like here, just sitting here, just, waiting for us to kind of come and excavate, explore, all in the aftermath of the 6-Day War. So you can see here this whole, it's like a whole like kind of neighborhood of houses. Let's go to the next slide. Take a look how beautiful, right? Like now this was restored. Okay, to be fair, like it was look like this, but not as like, fancy and shiny and new. It was, but they restored it authentically, just like Masada. So you can see the beautiful mosaic floor, right? This was obviously, wealthy people, perhaps, whatever they were, these houses were built for them by Herod. And you can see like the beautiful, the furniture, the side table they have over here, tables. They found all kinds of, furniture, fancy imported, type of like glass and dishes and all kinds of things. They found under here coins, dating it to, like when you find coins in the floor, that helps you really very nicely to date, and dating to Herod's time. So this is clearly 100% a Jewish building going back 2,000 years. And there's like, half a dozen or more of them all under the Jewish quarter today. One famous one is the Burnt House. Maybe you've been there, but this one here is called the Herodian Quarter, or the Wall Archaeological Museum. And I think it's it shows better, like you see more. Now, this is the destruction. This is the fire that destroyed Jerusalem. You can see the ashes here. And actually, you can see over here a picture of the actual ashes themselves, right? They have this like this case of ashes, and the archaeologists that dug here said they were just going home covered in ashes from the destruction of Jerusalem 2,000 years ago. It's unbelievable that we could come back and like find all of this here. And of course, also they found the ancient coins, which is like this coin here, the half shekel coin. We give the half shekel as a charity donation, a remembrance of the temple tax, and it's actually all the ancient coins. You can see here become made into the modern coins. When you come to Israel and you got some coins in your pocket, even they have meaning, right? Even the coins that you're buying, a coffee with or whatever, is going to take you back, back in time and to, as we say, Chadesh Yameinu Kakedem, renew our days like the days of old. That was takes us right back. Like it's all just sitting here, just as it was left. Now we're going to leave the museum. We go back up to the ground level of the Jewish quarter. And this is where the surrender takes place. Now, before the surrender, this is where the kids used to play. And the kids used to play here, and they'd play these games like, oh, if you were in, a 7-year-old, right? Pua Steiner, she writes this book, fabulous book, Forever My Jerusalem. I highly recommend this book. It's really easy read, but it's so meaningful, all about her childhood in this time in 1948. And she said, yeah, we used to hang out here in this plaza, and we used to play a game like, would you be in the Haganah? Would you be fighting in which fighting group would you be in? Would you be in the Lehi? Would you be in the Irgun? Which group would you be in? That was like one of their games. And this is the place where they're going to surrender May 28th, and they're going to say, okay, you have a couple of hours and take your stuff and go. And it was really difficult because the people who left here, some of them could never return to this part of the Jewish quarter. They could never come back because it was so traumatic, the leaving at this time and leaving their homes. And here's Abdullah El Tel. he's the one that Mike was mentioning about destroying the Jewish quarter and the Jews will never come back. Here he is just before he comes to Jerusalem. He's actually the one who destroyed, or he's involved with destroying Gush Etzion, the Etzion block. We've spoken about that before. And here he's got the Jewish prisoner. He's taking them prisoner of war. And then he's going to come to Jerusalem. But, you know, it's not all so horrible and sad and difficult, right? All the trauma, because there's always a silver lining. And this is a beautiful story. Perhaps it's a legend. Perhaps it really happened. You have these two rabbis. You have here Rabbi Velvel Midsberg, Ashkenazi, and the Sephardi Ben Zion Chazan. And they volunteered when it was decided that the Chorva had been blown up. They don't see any way out of this. They're gonna surrender. The military was brand new, you know, IDF. They don't have the ability to really properly defend the people, and so they said, we're willing to risk our lives to make a surrender. And they, you know, gives a couple coins to tzedakah, and they go out with the white flag and they're shot at. Now, they, you know, survived. One was lightly injured. They take them to here. You can see them surrounded here by the Arab Legion, the Jordanian soldiers, and they're sitting there calmly. And in comes Abdallah al-Tel, the Jordanian commander. And he's very impressed with these rabbis. And he says, Rabbi Minsberg, you know, and with an interpreter, you know, they don't really speak the same language, but, you know, I want you to give me a bracha, give me a blessing. And he says, you know, the rabbi says, listen, you know, I'd like to help, but, you know, me giving you a blessing is like a curse to my people. So I can't really do that. But then the rabbi kind of looks around the room. He's surrounded by the enemy. He's like, you know what? Okay, fine. Okay, I want to bless you, that you rise higher in the ranks of your profession, but you never harm, or your people never harm another Jew in Jerusalem. And the legend goes that Abdallah al-Tel says, amen, okay, amen, you know. So it's an amazing thing because, you know, maybe this happened, or maybe someday this will happen, this type of an idea. In any case, I'd like to say this is the real, you know, peace agreement, and the details haven't been quite worked out yet. But certainly a very nice moment. Here we see Moshe Dayan and Abdallah al-Tel signing on the green line, right? They just take that green marker, green pencil, and say, okay, Israel stopped here, Jordan stopped here. And that again becomes what's called in the world East and West Jerusalem. And it's a hot topic. I mean, it's been now in the news because of the new government in Israel, and that's worth its own perhaps discussion. But you know, it's a topic that just, you know, it's still very, very current, very, very relevant today. Now, this is an amazing picture. I'll take a minute to understand this picture, but remember that Mike showed us at the beginning of the tour Jaffa Gate, and he showed us that there was a wall, and this wall had been there, and it was a moat wall. It was like, you know, it was over the moat, basically meaning that the gate had a door, but the place where the cars drive through, that used to be closed up. And then in 1898, they're going to open it up for Kaiser Wilhelm II for his official visit. So now this is that same space, and you can see there's a wall here, and there's a soldier here. And what happened? So actually the Jordanians, when the city was divided and the Jordanians were in the old city and Israel was only outside the old city and had no ability to come in, so they actually built walls against the wall, like the 500-year-old wall that we were looking at the beginning with Mike. This is that same place, and the Jordanians put up more walls so that it becomes completely barricaded. Now, after the 6-Day War, Israel comes in. This is a soldier from the engineering corps, and this is a picture that is really not known. I have a friend who's a guide who's like, this is his family story. His father was in this engineering corps, and he's trying to gather up all these pictures from the soldiers. So they're like really hot off the press. And so here he is taking down that wall that the Jordanians put up, that was in the same place, right, that used to be there before Kaiser Wilhelm, and he's taking it down. Now, Israel was like so much wanted to just get rid of this trauma of the divided city that there isn't a lot of record of all of this, but it is kind of interesting to kind of, you know, piece back together the story and be able to take a look at that. And I want to end here we'll turn around in the same courtyard. You see all these children. And the children are always here, like, watch your head because the balls are flying. They're playing. This is their playground. This is their school here. There's a school here. There's another school back over here. And so there's like an ancient column, right? That's just Jerusalem, right? Like a 2,000-year-old column in the play yard. Okay. And over here, there's an inscription. And it's just down over here on this wall. And Rav Hadari, who I mentioned was the founder of Yeshivat Kotel. So he was very involved with also rebuilding the Jewish quarter after the Six-Day War. And he was literally going through the rubble, like finding old, pieces that were like from synagogues and important, pieces. They shouldn't be thrown out. And he said, you have to put this here. You have to put, there's the prophet Zechariah, that he has a prophecy about Jerusalem, that the squares of the city will be crowded with boys and girls playing in the open spaces. He says, you have to put this here because these kids are like always playing here. But he said he wanted to change it. And he said, you don't write that they will be, they shall be, like in the future. He says that they were already. And that's a bit controversial, like changing, words of the Bible, but that's what he did. And so he put that up here on the wall. You can see that if you come to Jerusalem, you can actually see that inscription that Rav Hadari had put there on the wall, but basically celebrating the fact that we have returned to these properties with a tremendous amount of meaning and, and all the generations of Jewish people that were just dreaming to returned to Jerusalem, came back, bought property, built houses, invested their lives in being here. And now, the city is renewed, and it's a lot of fun. It's a lot of fun in the Jewish quarter. And if you get a chance, there's even more. So if you get a chance to do a tour of the Jewish quarter, don't worry, we haven't seen it all. I'm going to undo the share.
Right. Thank you so much, Mike and Leah, for this very informative, interesting, scintillating tour of the old city. Okay, we have time. If anybody has any questions, you can feel free to unmute yourselves. Anybody? Dorothy?
Hi, this was really, really very, very interesting. I was fortunate enough in 1967 to be part of the first group of students who were bused up to the original Mount Scopus. This was a whole big deal. It was a whole thing. And it was very interesting to see those buildings. I think there was like 1 or 2 buildings still standing. And right next to the building that we were going to be in, I was taking summer classes. There was a plat, kind of like a field, just dirt. And there were big signs, Asur, because it was a minefield. So you had to be careful. So we went up in the building, and our teacher, there were windows, and our teacher said, well, this is this biblical site, and this is this biblical site. It was like, it just was blowing your mind that you could look at the window from there and see like all these biblical sites, and we were up there.
Wow.
Yeah. Panther?
Rabbi?
Yeah, well, hold on. Panther Halpern has his hand up.
Thank you so much for another wonderful tour. I think, like myself, a lot of our congregation hasn't been to Jerusalem in a few years. What would you say in the last 10 or 15 years would be or a couple of the biggest changes?
And Leah, you want to take a shot at it?
Wow. So Jerusalem is like, I mean, we literally can't keep up with it. And, I'm mostly in Jerusalem, but it's very dynamic. It's being excavated at, exponentially. It's amazing. Wow. In the last, let's say 10, well, everything you're going to see, like everything that's being excavated was maybe known about since 1867, like a little bit. But now it's just you're getting more and more. Like you're just the picture is just broadening. So, if you could see a little bit of the Kotel, at the beginning, and then they started with the Kotel tunnels, the Western Wall tunnels. Now, the tunnels has opened up, different tours and more areas, right? The City of David was known about from 1867, but slowly, it's become the most excavated site in Jerusalem. There's at Jaffa Gate, the Tower of David is being now made accessible, and also they have an excavation there that they have so much that they actually forgot about it. It's a fabulous excavation. They literally forgot about it. They just had so much to show, and they reopened it just recently, and so that's also it's like you'll go to the same places, it'll look familiar, but you get to go deeper. You just get to see more and to learn more.
How about the City of David, right? The City of David has had tremendous excavations in the last 15 years. And guess what? In the next 5 years, it again, if you haven't been here in 5 years, it's going to all change, because just a couple of weeks ago it was announced that there was a deal finally made with the Greek Orthodox Church to buy the land on the other side of what's known as the Shiloach Pool. We guided there, and when we studied it, we were told, listen, Greek Orthodox Church is not interested in selling their land, and there's just this little part of the Shiloach Pool, but it really extends on further. It was just purchased, and now they're going to excavate the entire pool. And not only that, they're going to excavate what's known as the Pilgrim's Road, which led from that pool all the way up to the Temple Mount. And while Leah and I have both taken plenty of people through that route, it's like this little kind of tunnel. It's not good for people over like 6 feet tall, and they're going to open that all up. And that's going to be, absolutely gorgeous. You'll get a real good idea of just how amazing and beautiful, wide that street was. I think when they're done with the excavations, which hopefully will be another 5 years. And I'll speak to one other thing, which is kind of a little bit more, I guess, a lot more modern. They've totally redone the Mamilla Mall in the last 10, 15 years, so that leading up to the Jaffa Gate, that's all been redone. There's world-class shopping there. But moreover, and this is true throughout Israel, but especially I think in Jerusalem, and that is in the last 15 years, the quality of food restaurants has gone through the roof, to the point where I tell people that tourists from Europe come on foodie tours. They literally fly to Israel, right? It's only a 3, 4, 5 hours tops from wherever you want in Europe. They come here to eat, right? And anyone who was in Israel 15, 20 years ago really knows that, listen, that was not why you came to Israel, but it has really become a foodie destination. We've got internationally trained chefs, and, using that Jewish ingenuity to create amazing dishes in amazing restaurants. And I think, that needs to be said, that it's, yes, there's a lot of history, there's a ton of culture, and you can come here and drink some of the, we'll compete with any European country with wine and food at this point. Michelin's coming. They said Michelin is actually going to come to rate our restaurant. Honestly, they're coming. They're on their way. Very soon, we're going to have Michelin rated restaurants in Israel.
Okay. Joan, you had a question?
No, I just want to say my sister was there for the 6-day war. She rode into Jerusalem with she probably had a friend on a tank. And maybe I should call her later and find out really what she experienced in those days before she forgets. That was 1967.
Yeah, very good. I want to hear that story. Anybody else? Okay, again, Rhonda.
I just want to say, Jerry and I have been there many, many, many times. And I actually learned more today than I've ever known. I have no idea how much I didn't know. So I just can't begin to thank you. This is, and it got me out of bed, which is a very good.
Even more important.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Yeah,
And
so
she
welcome.
left,
We love it.
the person
Enjoy it.
left, but I want to again thank our sponsor because this is such a fabulous experience for us. Thank you. Thank you.
Okay. Again,
I
thank
just
you,
want to,
Mike
I
and
just want to
Leah.
say one thing. Yeah, so it's so wonderful to hear your stories and your connections, and definitely, you know, ask, you know, people who are, if you were in Jerusalem, write it down, share it with your families. Like, these stories are precious. And I think that Jerusalem is the kind of thing that we all, you know, even if you've been here and you've been here even many times, and I know, I mean, I'm in the old city, maybe even 4 days a week. It's layers and layers and layers. And it's like too much to take in all at once. Like, it's just built that way that, you know, it's like eating like a big chocolate cake. Like, you can't, you know, it's not good to do it all at once. Like, so it's kind of like we take it in layer by layer. And this is what we even say in Kabbalat Shabbat. If we sing Lecha Dodi, right, we say that V'nivneta Ir al Tila, that the city will be rebuilt on its ancient mound. It's built in layers. It's like we've seen some of the layers. It's literally built in layers. And I feel like we come to learn about Jerusalem, it's like we can only take it in layers. We can only take it in like, you know, like an onion, you know, a little bit at a time, because it is so rich and it is so beautiful and so fascinating. And so, yeah, so come back again. And, you know, and there's so much on the internet and there's so much out there. It's really a fantastic time to be living.
Izzy? You're muted.
I just wanted to say that the knowledge that the two of you have is just mind-boggling. We so appreciate it. We come back time and time again, and we're just blown away by the two of you. And we are so lucky to have found you two. Every time it is just better than the next time. And I agree with Rhonda. I wrote her a note. What a great decision we made picking this particular topic. And thank you. You guys are incredible. Appreciate
Thank
it.
you.
We enjoy it. We enjoy you guys so much.
Yeah. We are, just before you go, we are making plans for Mike and Leah to join us on Yom HaAtzmaut, Israel's Independence Day, the 75th year. So we've been talking about things that we can do. So stay tuned for news about that as we go at our planning stage. Again, thank you all for being here. Our return flight is going to board soon. Again, thanks to our anonymous sponsor for doing this for us. We really appreciate it. So again, hope everybody has a good day. Lehitraot, and you take care, and we will speak to you very soon.
Great. Thanks, everybody.